Welcome to the Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. I'm Peter Brandenburger, and I help leaders embrace chaos to turn disruption into an advantage. Each episode brings stories and strategies to help you stop fighting disruption, lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times. Today, I'm joined by Steve Porter, Global Client Director and Engineering Program Manager at Intel, leading client innovation to create winning solutions with their customers. With over 3 decades of experience leading customer innovation across global programs, Steve brings a calm confidence and depth of insight that only comes from leading through disruption again and again, many of which I was a co-traveler over the years we worked together at Intel. In our conversation, we explore how to lead customer relationships and deal with internal dynamics. Steve shares stories from his work transforming unused products into new opportunities, helping a customer launch faster than industry giants, and navigating the art of saying no in ways that build trust. Together, we look at how great leaders stay grounded through uncertainty, ask the right why, and build relationships that thrive beyond transactions. Enjoy. Thank you, Steve, for joining. It's been a while and great to catch up today and talk a little bit about leadership, especially in the context of how you deal with customers and what you've learned from that experience.
Yeah, happy. Thanks for having me. Happy to share some insights and experiences with you and others that may click on this.
Well, before we jump into the details, maybe as a way of checking in people to get to know you a little bit, why don't you share what matters most to you these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. It has changed over the years, but as of recent, health and happiness have taken like a front and center approach, both in my personal life and my professional life. So that is absolutely what matters most to me right now.
Yeah. Is there something that sparked this to come to
Yeah.
be?
So I had a snowboarding accident about 6 years ago. Long story short, I ended up having an acetabular fracture, and I've been living pretty much in pain for years since it happened, up until the point where I just couldn't walk anymore, right? And so the doctors wanted to put it off as long as possible because hip replacements don't last forever. But it finally got to the point where the decision was my body made the decision for me. So I went and had a full hip replacement. I'm 2 years into it now, and it was a game changer. Like for the things that I like to do and enjoy doing, it was like a reset on life. So I think using that as a reminder, take care of yourself mentally, physically, and then I also had a brother who had a very tough time with what was supposed to be a normal heart procedure. Ended up being like a double bypass surgery. It didn't go well at all. So those things that happen in life, you get so busy that you kind of forget what matters most to you.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons why I like starting with this is to ground everybody back to what matters most to them. Well, thank you. Uh, you talk here about leadership and leading through disruption and change and chaos that comes our way, as opposed to trying to control things, which I believe is a fallacy to begin with. Maybe let's jump into doing something very different, which is using processors that were built for mobile products in a desktop product. So maybe why don't you talk about, some of your learnings from that stage?
Yeah, this is one of those things where, what is the saying? One man's junk is another man's treasure. We had these parts that were not being utilized and actually getting scrapped due to a performance yield issue, right? And so we started looking at why aren't we, using these parts differently? And so the team got together and came up with the ideation of, hey, what if we, use these mobile parts that, don't have really good battery life in something that doesn't need a battery. And then in doing that, we took a look at the form factors that existed, and that kind of bred into this whole innovative product of like really scaling down the form factor size into a miniature type of form factor. We even kicked off a Nook segment that kind of grew out of this effort and activity. But yeah, that all started with I forget what the numbers were, but we were able to salvage, use, and actually create a new market with junk, what others
Yeah.
consider junk. So that was pretty interesting. I think the other thing that, leading into this, what a time we live in, right? Like we were right on the cusp of engineering and architecting for this AI revolution. And we have designs that are capable, and software and hardware folks are busy at work, but we're kind of like right at the infancy stage of this of what is it going to be and what is the future going to look like. And so it's been extremely dynamic lately, trying to see where this all leads us to.
Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's also a lot of hope and potential. And I'll define hope as something that you can see and that you know things to go work towards that path. You're just not sure exactly how that's going to happen. So it's hope is a strategy, not just something you wish, like a wishful thinking is one of the ways I define hope.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, so there's uncertainty as you're looking to what's ahead with the AI and so forth. Maybe we can go back to some other experiences where the future wasn't clear. I mean, one, I know you and I engaged with a company called Vizio, and maybe just talk about what was that experience? Because I don't think we really understood what we were getting into or what was going to happen, analogous to what's ahead of us for AI.
Yeah, I think it was interesting with the interaction that we had with Vizio at the time. It was so different. You got this little electronics company deciding to enter the market space and go up against really well-established companies that have been in the segment for a long time. They're building TVs, but they're looking for opportunities to expand. So they came to us with aspirations in several different areas of technology. I think they had aspirations for phone, tablet, PC. What else did they have?
Smart TV. I mean,
Smart
that
TVs.
was somewhat new
TV
at the
was
time.
the lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that ability to kind of work with a small company and kind of teach them the ropes of what our product capabilities were was interesting, but it's such a small company. And quite quickly, I'll do a little bit of a storytelling. So their base of operation was in Long Beach, California. So my manager at the time approached me and said, hey, this is a good opportunity for you. They want to enter the segment and use our ingredients. Can you go teach them, help them spit out a product? And so day one of the meeting, I think I was paired up with a sales and marketing person, myself, and one other biz dev guy. And so we go into this building, we're in this room, and everybody gave introductions by name, but not by title, right? And we started through the meeting, and we got to a certain point where we were like, all right, well, when do we meet your engineering team, right? It's like they pointed to one single person. And then we had some dialogue about the direction that was going to be set, and we whiteboarded a few options. It was like, we're used to this being a month-long conversation, right? And another gentleman in the room responded, we're going to go this direction. The velocity and speed at which decisions were made, it turns out that one person was William Wang, the CEO of the company. So like here we're used to dealing several layers below the executive level to kind of architect, build, plan, stage, make decisions. And things were happening in real time in the room. And that was my first professional experience about how fast and nimble the right small team could move and be in the industry. And I think you remember the punchline. Out of all the businesses that were engaged to launch products, we ended up being the first and only one to actually launch in market with them.
Yeah. We being the PC side for everybody. I think it's interesting because they really just had a team of three. It's the decision maker, in this case, the CEO. They had a product guy and an engineering guy, and that was it.
Yeah, they had two ODMs, as you do. You go and look at ODMs to support and build and manufacture. They had a couple and made a final decision on those, I think, within a 3-month period. And then that really locked things down to a really fast-paced velocity to market. By the way, if you have the ability of I put some links in on the background story to William Wang. It's something that was like a Hollywood movie. He was actually in plane accident and survived it, and then came off to promote the Vizio brand And again, going up against Goliath in the TV industry. And I think for the longest time, they were top three, right? It was Samsung, LG, and Vizio. And Sony was, I think, a close fourth. So very good experience. It was something that I think you can, in this environment of today of can you do more with less, I think the answer is yes, but you have to have that decision-making authority defined so that you don't stall out and wait for critical responses and answers.
Yeah, the if you look at it as a system, and the delay in the system is greatly reduced if you have the key decision makers fully engaged, fully there, like in one conference room. You could have everybody in this, the ODMs, the Intel side and the Vizio side all together and making decisions very quickly, as you talked about. So that it's managing the delay in that system so that there's a lot less.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a huge controversy, I think, that is starting to play itself out. Many companies are back to office. We're now back to office 4 days a week. I think just looking at the efficiencies and throughput that we have, especially with newer employees, has been largely beneficial. I see our teams running a lot faster now that we are face to face.
And what do you think contributes to that? What about being face to face helps with velocity?
I think it's the human interaction, and this is something that, from a career development standpoint, we go to a lot of coaching sessions, seminars, and things like that. One of my favorite ones was the Stephen Young Micro Inequities course.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have even your camera on, like, you're missing so many of those physical cues that people have to understand, like, does the person understand what I'm saying? Do they agree with what I'm saying?
Well, very little is actually communicated through the words that we say. The tone, the language, the body language, the energy at which you're talking about, etc. I agree. If you're in a culture that typically doesn't have video on for video conferencing, going from that back to in present is a big step.
Yeah. There's an exercise too that I personally use because obviously a multinational corporation with teams all over the place is challenging, time zone wise and otherwise. But if I'm kicking off a new meeting series, whether it's short term or long term, if you turn your camera on the first meeting and others start turning your camera on, that becomes the meeting that everybody kind of assumes we're going to have a video call, right? If you're in a series that has always had cameras off and you're the one guy that turns it on, you'll probably be the only guy with your camera on.
Yeah, it's setting the precedents or the expectations of that group when they come together. And yes, starting it. I mean, you can name it too up front. Like, I expect you to be on video because it's better. We can better communicate and connect, and probably have fewer meetings. I would postulate because you have less misalignment.
There's always corner cases, and flexibility, I think, is important too. But in general,
Oh yeah. If you're out,
that's
picking up your kid, then yeah, you don't need to be on the video. But if you're sitting at home and wanting to do a bunch of other emails, and that's why you take the video off, that's what I'm talking about. Like,
yeah.
if you're not really engaged in the meeting, you either shouldn't be there, or then you're gonna have to revisit something at some point because you weren't paying attention.
That's what AI and recall are for now.
But even then you have to read it, right?
It's not perfect. Yeah, it's not.
You have to know you missed it. You have to know it was significant, and you have to come back. In the moment, as a team, you can't recreate that without creating the team back together, even with AI. If you have a summary and go, oh, shit, I missed that. That really should have been, I have something else to contribute. But if they've already made the decision, it could be too late. Or if everybody's dispersed from the meeting, you can't have a conversation. So, yeah, it helps, but I don't know, it's a very lagging indicator. So I guess one way of putting it. Let's jump into some other stories around maybe the benefit of taking a little bit of a detour in a technical career. I know you were an ops manager. So what did you learn from when you kind of stepped back from making great products and technical engineering kind of engagement to more of an ops person?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to become the backseat driver of your organization. I think to get better at your role and more impactful in leadership, I think it's important to understand the larger organization, meaning put yourself in other people's shoes don't be so critical, but actually gain the experience. And so I've been lucky enough to do operations, which had a very diverse hardware, software, and interfaces with sales, marketing, and legal. And seeing the organization from a different perspective was pretty eye-opening. I still think I see and have benefits from doing that today, especially when hardware and software lines are blurred to deliver user experiences.
Yeah, they both have to come together to deliver the user experience.
I think the other opportunity which we've had and I've taken advantage of with the company I work for is doing what we have call sabbatical coverage. So you actually have a rotational responsibility for a 4 to 8 week period of covering somebody else in their role. And we get so busy with the deliverables that we have in this do more with less society that you have to make it part of your career path to do something like that. And if you're working for a place that doesn't have it, look for those opportunities, whether it's somebody out for a leave of absence or, creating a role for yourself to go do and then come back to your regular role. I think you'll see immense benefits in doing that.
And maybe talk more about what happens to my job I'm leaving behind, and maybe I'm never going to get it again. What would you say that taking this leap and jumping into something new for 4 to 8 weeks, why is that more beneficial than, continuing your work?
Yeah, I think if you're going to provide a temporary vacancy, it also feeds itself with others in your organization. And I've had this opportunity too. When I've done that, I think human nature, if you're fear-driven and don't embrace the the change, you probably will worry more about that. But what I've had found is, the people that backfill you have a different perspective and gain that perspective of what your role is. It feeds itself, I guess is what I would say. And I don't think it's a perfect world. If you don't have a structure of doing that, I think it's still okay, right? Like you may find something that you become more passionate about in your career. So I think it's healthy all the way around. I think it's healthy for the organization. I think it's healthy for growth. And realistically, we're in an environment where good years we're hiring and bad years there's corporate people movement reductions. And so being able to navigate and understand beyond your job role is an asset that will help you out during those times.
Yeah. I'm hearing a couple things. One is being in a curiosity kind of mindset. So you're curious about these other opportunities, but also that curiosity, when you bring it back to your team, you bring a new perspective because your experiences has changed. But also if somebody has stepped up into that and has brought their new perspective into it. So it's kind of like keeping it fresh is maybe one way of looking at that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. And then
keeping it fresh. And we talk about, I had a manager once too that helped me with sphere of influence, right? Your sphere of influence, when you can branch out further into the organization and your customer base, that's going to benefit you as well, regardless of your role.
and maybe I think that'll bring us to relationships, which was maybe next. But when you talked about this process of staying curious and moving and rotating around, it's really a long-term benefit, maybe less than a short-term benefit. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Yeah.
having the long game in mind. And long game could be, 6 months to a year. It doesn't have to be super long, but it may not help the deliverable of what your team is doing in the next 2 or 3 weeks when you leave because of that disruption. But the benefit of to the new team, for you bringing in the new perspective of the new team, even if you don't know much about it, even people from other countries coming over. Remember, a leader from India came over to lead our team. That before that, we had more friction with than what we did afterwards. And it really just kind of helped understand the barrier because he walked in the other leader's shoes. And that's a very powerful way. I've really experienced it. I mean, it's much more powerful.
Yeah. The inter-office politics are always interesting, but you had a guest on your show. You'll have to help me out. She was an Army.
Emily.
Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emily Hannenberg. Yep.
So Emily Hannibal talked about the human endeavor, and I think that's it, right? Like, yes, there's work, there's a job to be done, and I think being competitive is healthy to a point, but when you start applying a layer of it's a human endeavor, we're all resources. So if you have a resource or interoffice politics that aren't working, like that needs to get fixed immediately. And one of the mechanisms to do that is to do some of this job sharing or role sharing and coverage. It fixes it real quick.
Yeah, and I've talked to somebody else, Ahmed Omer, who you know, and we talked about from that perspective, talking about how you can give people your responsibility if they really want it as a way of countering this competitive, hey, I'm going to try to do your stuff. Okay, here it is. Like call bluff on it and see if they actually can do it. One, and they may realize that, hey, I've been really wanting something that I don't really want or can't really do. They may not fess up to it, but that experience can really be more providing alignment between people who are coming after what you have. It's kind of
Yeah.
counterintuitive, especially if you have confidence that you are in the right position and with the right people and the right team to go do this. And with that
Yeah.
power, it's like, yeah, this is it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a fatherly piece of this too, because I have a 19-year-old son, right? And he has a little bit of anxiety because he doesn't want to know what he wants to do. And I told him I work with people that still don't know what they want to do, but it is a maturity thing, right? Like now that I think, confident and have a ton of experience, I'm constantly balancing the things I want to go do and the things that I have to go do from a time management perspective. And so if somebody wants to come and take a chunk of time of something that I'm doing, it's always easier to let them do it if it's something I don't really want to do. But even the stuff that you want to do, that list has been always longer for me, and I think other working professionals too. And so I never understood why people get so territorial. It's like, sure, you want to do this? You now own it. It frees me up to go work on my career goals and aspirationally probably work on more stuff that I want to do than I have to do.
Yeah, that reminds me of just that rotating through sabbatical or coverages. Because if you come back to your team and you realize that your team can do this without you, okay, great. Like that's a great place to be. Now let's move on to your other, 10 things that are on your list or on your manager's list that would to do. Like if people within the team, you want my job, great. Because if you can do that, then I can go do something else. It's raising up the whole group and the whole team, and that only supports all of us from a human perspective, back to the human endeavor. And from a business perspective, it's definitely better. If you're trying to be territorial and you have this whole friction, you're spending countless hours and effort in the fighting mode as opposed to the building and being productive, which is just draining. Just drains on you as a person, drains on the bottom line, drains creativity, drains, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I've always been, yes, health and happiness, right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, keep talking outwardly, like keeping your customers happy, I also believe is a human endeavor, but also a relationship thing, right? I think when you view the perfect utopia is when you're seen as an actual intact team with no corporate boundaries between different companies. One of the extreme examples of leadership values that I witnessed was actually from a senior VP of another company, a major OEM. And we had an issue. It was our issue. Lines were down. We hadn't root caused what the issue actually was yet. And I mean, we're calling into meetings just kidding, just beat up, like raked over the coals because lines are down. It's real money. We call into this call with this particular leader who we had developed a relationship with, and the first thing he says to us, how can I help? What can we do? Who do we need to send where to fix the problem? So rather than take a half hour just getting yelled at and screamed at, within 5 minutes we were identifying, action items and people to go and resolve, which ultimately ended up root causing the issue and resolving it. But I thought it was such an excellent example of the relationship, but also leadership.
Yeah. And staying out of that being competitive or blaming or negative draining energy instead of saying that for half an hour of some executive time, which is a lot of time for them, to let's make some decisions and actions towards solving this and kind of staying curious. Those questions are all very curious questions. Like, how can I help? He may not have known. I mean, maybe he had some ideas, but how can I help? That's a wonderful open-ended way of starting a conversation. Really being curious about what the collective team, like this intact team, as you said, that crosses boundaries of companies, what can you all do?
Yeah, this leads into another link that I provided that hopefully will be in the
Yeah, it'll be
link
in the
for
show
people
notes.
to access. Yeah,
Yep.
I think the 5 questions why is like one of my favorite tools in the toolkit because we get busy and it's transactional and maybe the customer's calling for a spec or a roadmap date, right? Why? Why are you asking for that, right? And you
Mhm.
start asking why a couple of times, and it may be completely orthogonal to helping them solve like a critical issue or a barrier or building a relationship of, like either teaching them how to fish and where to go to get the information so they don't keep asking you the same question every other, week or year as it may be. But understanding and building that relationship with the customer, I think is hugely important. And the 5 questions why will do that. You just can't fall into the transactional, fetch a rock and then come back and then fetch another rock and come back.
Yeah, I love that. I use asking the why to um, keep defining what's underneath it, what's behind it, what's really supporting it. Uh, Um, there's several people out there, Simon Sinek, Patrick Lencioni are two that like start with the why, and the why is, and I'm touching my heart because this is the emotion behind it. And if you can get to the emotion underneath why they want this, like this is beyond just corporate like understanding, like asking the why to get to that. That's what's going to bring your energy, and that's the energy. That's what the nutrients they're looking for is to feed that energy. So to me, this that why is great. I think the one maybe distinctions between a customer asking customer why, when you're talking with a customer, for you who've had a relationship for what, a decade with some of these companies and people, that you understand a lot of what is motivating them, their business, their product line, like how they do things, why they build them, design them, create them in the context. And by you asking the why, you can help them connect to what is some of those things. It's a much more powerful thing because you have that experience and perspective from theirs as well as your perspective from your side, and then bring in the why so it kind of connects in and becomes much more powerful, as you said, to really deliver what they want, not just what they're asking for.
And I think another relationship one that comes to mind too of how do you build that relationship? For whatever reason, I got roped into doing a lot of the executive briefing review and prep materials and conversations heading into these twice yearly biannual type of reviews. We always have had our leaders kind of mandate that the real intent is to make your peer and your customer look good, right? Having those conversations of what they're trying to achieve in their own organization and then providing the solution space to help them achieve what their goals are, I think is also very
Yeah.
beneficial.
To me, that brings up the mutuality of relationship. A lot of people talk about relationship and, oh, I have a relationship with somebody. And if you ask the question, is it mutual? And one of the ways you could define that is the value you're providing them roughly equivalent to the value you're getting back? And from a customer perspective, if you're over providing value, they're kind of feeling that indebtedness of providing value to you. Not that it's a trick or an influence thing, but it's human nature. You want to be in a mutually beneficial relationship where the value is going back and forth. And by the way, the value is more like an integration over time, not in one snapshot. So if you're going into a meeting and how much value can you provide, helping them look good, helping them solve their problems, like that executive coming into the meeting, how can I help you solve your problem? Because it's still going to help me. He knew the equation there. He can provide a lot more value, and that value will come back to him and maybe his competitors, but it was very much a value relationship. I guess how have you experienced that?
I mean, I do think, you know, anytime, I mean, it's hard to extract. It takes effort to extract that conversation sometimes. Just ending meetings or making a conscious effort to ask, like, how can I help? Oftentimes, we'll close out a meeting with that question and then immediately get into some area that's pretty critical that we need to do follow-up and action items on that wasn't part of the original agenda. And so I experience that daily, but it takes an effort and a constant reminder, not just to get out of the meeting, especially when you have an hour or 2 hour long meeting, reserve the time to ask that question.
Yeah. With our decades of experience working with customers together, I think I would even add to that about just what problems are they facing? Maybe not even problems that, you're creating or that they perceive that you could even help with. Because just knowing what keeps them up at night, what are they most worried about, could have nothing to do with your relationship, but it could be something you could help. And they're not even aware maybe how you could help. So it's like asking those questions about, what are your pain points? What I enjoyed most is having this discussion like at lunch or dinner or over coffee. I mean, maybe not even in a formal setting. What's keeping you up at night? What's your pains you're dealing with? Because you really understand what they're going through and also where they may need space away from you, like in a customer relationship. Like they're not focused on you because they have this other problem and there's nothing you can do with it. Okay, maybe what is needed is you to give distance and space and time for them to do it and not bug them about something that's not urgent from their perspective, even though it is maybe from yours. The other thing this brings up is the art of saying no, or how to say no and why to say no to a customer. And I know you and I've talked about this and experienced this, but it's really maybe for the sake of everybody else. What's your take on the art of saying no? Why to say no to a customer? Where does that actually benefit you and them?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wide, varied topic. You always want to tell a customer yes, but the first thing that comes to mind is a new innovation in technology that we're developing. I mean, a lot of this thing comes down to resources. So, we have this technology. We mutually decided to say no, but the customer keeps coming back and asking for support, right? And so, as the escalations are coming in about, I know you said no, but can you just get us from point A into point B? I think if in this particular case, if we said yes, they're not going to, it would impact the velocity and actual money making products that needed the attention. So we could say yes and they would be happy that we changed our mind from a no to a yes, but that would be followed up by either a quality or a monetary business impact that had they known ahead of time, they would not have wanted you to say yes. Or it'll come up after, well, why is this product delayed now by a quarter? Well, because you had us go help you over here. And those are the same people that were working on this. That plays out over and over and over again. There are some things that when it gets escalated up, that no's turn into maybes a little bit. So you try to piece it out and kick the rock or can a little bit further down the road for relationship reasons. But you got to be really clear about communication when you do that.
Yeah, that
You
reminds
know,
me of yes, if, which, yes, I can do it. I could do it, but here's the implications of it. Like, I'm going to delay this other product. The quality is going to do, the cost is going to go up. Or you can do it, but at a different timeline, 3 years out instead of 2 years. Like it's a yes for 3 years, but not for 1 year or whatever that is. And just being clear of the trade off. And then it's a discussion and it's an alignment of this is what yes and no means, or a maybe, which is can be very nebulous about what a maybe is. But it's the trade offs, I think, that really make that real.
yeah. We had an executive, you'll probably remember this too, that abolished stretch goals. It
Yeah.
was like, hey, like having stretch goals sounds really good, but not only are we are not meeting any stretch goal, we're not meeting the baseline goals. And so there was kind of this period of time in our organization where stretch goals were not allowed. They're back, by the way. But yeah, it's the same thing of art of saying no, right?
Well, it's clearly understanding you can commit. When you say yes, you should understand what it is, like what really the ask is, what's the time frame, what's the quality to deliver, what does success look like, however you get to that. is to me one piece. And then, yeah, what are the trade-offs and can you commit to it? In other words, do you have the resources? Does the team have the resources? Is it committed or is it possible? And if it's possible, it's not a yes. It's a, hey, I'll come back to you in a couple of days, weeks when I know we have commitment. But to me, if you don't get to that, it's nebulous.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of our mentors always used to tell us that you don't have to say no, but it's really having a priority conversation with them. And it kind of gets to these trade-offs. I'm not saying no to that, but all these 5 other things are your first priority, so I'm gonna be working on those first. It's maybe a not now kind of answer as opposed to no forever, because I'm working on these priorities that you believe are top priorities. And if you don't believe that these are priorities, okay, let's change it. And it's back to that trade-off of what's a priority and what could be done. Because if you want me to do these 5 things, I can't also do this other thing without impacting those.
Yeah. Here's one for you. Because I struggle with this too. As organizations change, sometimes you don't have a history in a relationship, right? What do you do if you have a leader that's not well coached in leadership and doesn't want to hear any no's? How would you recommend folks establish that criteria and have the empowerment to say no?
I guess what comes to mind is those talking about really clear about what yes is so that you're not wasting time and fetching a rock on something that's not clear. And to me, the time frame and exactly what it is and is the why, what's the reason underneath it, really understanding the motivation are important because then when you go do all this work and come back days, weeks, months later to this person with this ask, you're following their why really. And so I think understanding that clarity is first. Assuming they have a capability to understand trade-offs and priorities, it's really having conviction and confidence about the trade-off. Like, if I do this, I can't do these other things. Or you can put it in their lap too. If I do this, which of these do you not want me to do? And then it gets at, I'm not saying no, but it's in order to do this, I got to do these things. And it could lead them to their own no, which is no, these other things are priority. So don't do that or don't do it now, or I'll look to somebody else to do it, which could be a viable answer. Or it could be, no, I want you to do it and I want you to do it successfully, which means you have to get one of these other things off your plate.
Yeah.
The other thing is practicing no. I mean, in the leadership program I went at Intel, we actually practiced saying no to other people, which sounds surprisingly easy. But in my experience and what I've seen this in different cohorts, it's very difficult to say no. And so it's getting comfortable. I always have to say, oh, it's my boss. I have to say yes. Well, you don't. You can say no. You can also ask for time. You can say, I'm not sure I can do this. And before I say yes, I want to go check. So I'm going to come back in a day or an hour or 2 weeks or whatever you think is the right time. And they should respect that, oh, you're not just saying yes. Ideally, you have people around this no person saying and practicing no with them. And you can do it in easier situations, doing some smaller tasks as opposed to the big tasks. Start there. But I guess what I'm getting at is question, is it you who is actually not wanting to say no, or is it that person not wanting to hear no?
I think with younger, inexperienced upper managers, they just want to hear yes, right? They don't want to hear the no.
Yeah. But if you start off saying no and people are engaged in this feedback process of what does it really mean to say yes and when sometimes it is a no, if you're in this clarification phase from the beginning, it's easier. But if you're not, or you're not in that mindset, it's going to take time. Or to put it differently, if you say it like 5 times, it's maybe the 6th time that this person actually understands what the hell you're trying to do, which is to get to a clear commitment and decision on what we're doing, what you're doing for them, and dealing with a request. The other thing is you can just give them some direct feedback offline. And you could put it in I statements. Like, I feel like you don't want to be told no, but in some cases, I feel like some of these should be a no, and just see what they say. And by the I statements, it's not blaming them. It's not saying you don't say no. It's saying I feel, because they can't argue with that statement.
Very true. Yeah.
And so keeping it in the I statements and then Ideally, you can do this in a conversation. And then once you state that, say, I'd like to hear your perspective. And if they go off on this tirade that no, everybody always has to say yes to me, then you're in an
Start looking
escalation.
for another. Start
Yeah,
looking.
yeah, you're in an escalation do loop, right? At that point, that person needs an intervention of some sort. Their manager, a peer of theirs, whoever might influence. I mean, that's if they have somebody that they trust or quote has their ear, then go after them and give them the same thing. This guy never says like wants to hear no, and people are scared to say no, and that's not good for him. Like you make it not his problem, but his opportunity.
Would you? Now I'm interviewing you. I mean, the other thing that came up of this is like at every level of your career, and I wish if there's something I could go back and change, I think one of the things that I would have done is establish the mentorship role earlier. It just so happens that I'm in a lull right now. I still have some mentors that I can still communicate with, but I don't have like an active mentor. But can you say more about the role of mentorship?
Yes. So there's a lot of different definitions of mentorship. So let me just start with my understanding of mentorship and I'll contrast it to like a manager and a coach mindset. A mentor is somebody who has typically experience that you're wanting to learn from. And so a lot of it is imparting experience and their wisdom in how they've done it, how they've tried it, different ways of thinking about it. I think in the best way is not here's how I did it, you should do it like that. Because the concern is one, they're a different person. Their experience is likely different and the world has shifted. And because all of that, what happened yesteryear or yesterday may not be the right same way to do it, but understanding more their mindset of how they went through it and why they made the decisions and some options like, hey, I did it this way, but also in your situation, maybe this and this. And they can give you some different ways, different perspectives. So if you approach mentorship from like understanding somebody else's perspective is one benefit of mentorship. The other is having somebody to talk to it that's not in your chain of command, which is the manager. So, which they could be biased, obviously, and there's a different relationship between you and your manager than just somebody coming in looking at this, because they could look at it from a perspective of you in this system, like in this case of this no manager. Like a mentor would be like, yeah, this is a big problem on him. It's not all yours to deal with. But how you can deal with it is these certain things, like how you manage it. So the mentorship can be that way. The other just simple thing, and I think this goes definitely for coaching and mentor, which is taking the time to reflect on things. Getting out of your own head thinking about a problem, like, oh, I got a problem with this customer, I got a problem with this customer. You can talk to your manager and get one input, and that's a great source, but also getting another perspective and kind of talking to the people in the real world as opposed to being in your head. And I'll extend in your head to ChatGPT and other forms of that. Like that is an echo chamber, in my opinion. That's just reinforcing your own kind of thinking and backwards looking, as opposed to what are these other, human perspective to the human endeavor on your challenge. And doing it earlier rather than later can prevent you from sitting in this stew of thinking about it and ruminating and so forth. So that's mentor. The coach is really helping you to understand what's the right solution or direction for you. They'll bring in some different perspectives. So there's a little bit of that mentorship that can happen if the person has experience, but it's really helping you get to it, which unearths potentially some limiting beliefs or limiting thinkings or something that's hindering you from doing what you may know is the right thing to do, and some practices to help go through that. So it's applying some activities and practice and some skills to go deal with those situations so that next time you can apply those skills and capabilities. It's like you're teaching to fish methodology. And then a manager, they're going to tell you what their perspective is, and you're going to feel obligated sometimes to do what they're saying. So there's that relationship that's quite different in this. A good manager can bring in coaching and mentoring, which is the gray area to this whole answer. Sometimes giving a very specific direction called delegation is the right thing for a manager. Like, go do this. And by this, not at the task level, but here's what I want you to work on. Here's the why. Here's the quality I want. Here's the timeline expectation. Here's my expectation of how it might impact other things you're going on. If they're that thoughtful of their requests or their delegation, then you have this box that's been delegated to you. And now within that box, you have complete authority of how to go do it. So it's not the micromanaging piece. Coaching or mentoring isn't going to tell you how to do it or dictate that or define that box. That's the management. But a manager can be a mentor and a coach.
A good one.
Yeah. And the other thing to do is what I ask some clients and people is when they ask me for a question, I'll ask them, do you want mentorship or do you want coaching? Do you want me to tell you how would have solved it in your shoes? Or do you want me to help you work through some questions and some limitations to get you to your answer? When I put it that way, most people want coaching, by the way, as long as they have the time to do it. And there's a time just to dictate, by the way. I mean, safety is a good example. Like if your kid's being unsafe and there's no time to sit them down and mentor them about the impacts of doing stupid stuff just to get them to stop doing stupid stuff. There's equivalent at work too. Well, Steve, it's been a good conversation. Before we wrap up, I have two questions for you. I'll lead with, what is the one leadership lesson that you continue to learn over and over again?
I think the one that I like the most is to not be afraid to fail, right? I think in a lot of times perfection is sometimes unattainable, especially the velocity that we're all working at these days, right? And so somewhere above a minimal viable product or MVP, I think is being able to take the risk, especially if you're in a leadership role, and then reflecting and making the error corrections so that you don't make the same mistakes twice. But failing and failing fast, I think, is something that constantly comes up kind of over and over again that
Yeah.
I strive to practice. It's emotional, right? We all want to be competitive. We all want to win. We all want to be perfect. But remind yourself that maybe perfect is the unobtainable goal.
Yeah. I would put that also in the category of a fallacy. Like you can't control things and it can't be perfect. And once you get comfortable with those two notions, I think you can live in the gray area that is life. Okay. The other question is, what is the one word that best describes your leadership mindset right now?
I think the one word that comes to my mind right now in the current environment is actually organizational, meaning organizing and prioritizing so that I can maintain the velocity and execution of things that matter most. So much is coming at us so fast that the better communicator I am, the better relationships and trust that I can build will help me in a leadership position achieve the goals that are both expected of me and my personal career path goals.
Yeah. I like it. I also tie that back to, in my opinion, a clear learning you've had from being an ops manager to talk about organization and structure to be able to move faster. I like
Yeah.
it.
I
So
welcome, back to the other conversation, I welcome more people to come in and want to take more of the things that I'm responsible for. Gain
yeah,
the experience, free me up. So next time you feel threatened, maybe look at it differently and see what you could be doing if you didn't have to defend a task, but actually offload it completely.
yeah. Like what fear is really behind that? I mean, you can ask yourself what fear is behind it, and is it rational? In other words, like what evidence do you have that that's going to be real? For example, oh, somebody's going to take this, and then I'm going to lose my job. Well, is A related to B, and what evidence do you have of that? All right, Steve. Well, I love the health and happiness, a little bit of organization there at the end. But thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom about customers and how disruption can help lead with kind of a customer mindset on this.
Yeah, and likewise, thank you for putting together this type of format. I hope that people find it useful. By onboarding onto this, I've had a chance of looking at some of the other podcasts, and they are fantastic. So I recommend folks just take a listen.
Catch up and go subscribe. Well, thank you. We'll talk later, Steve.
All right, thanks, Peter.
Thanks for listening to Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. Disruption isn't going away, but you can embrace it and turn it into an advantage. Until next time, stop fighting disruption lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times.